Every contact leaves a trace. I learned that the hard way, in a profession that doesn't forgive sloppy thinking. The case I'm thinking about started with shoes. A pair of shoes, sitting there on the late Mr. Jonas Hargreaves, like they had nothing to do with him. That was 1887, when a fictional detective with a cocaine problem and a violin made his first appearance, Sherlock Holmes. The name sounds like something a man would give himself if he wanted everyone to know he was the smartest one in the room. And he was. Smarter than most. Smarter than the police. Smarter than the criminals who underestimated him. It's the look that got me. Holmes bends down once, in a room full of death, looks at a dead man's shoes. So swiftly was the examination made that one might hardly have guessed the minuteness with which it was conducted. Finally, he sniffed the dead man's lips, and then glanced at the soles of the patent leather boots. A Study in Scarlet, 1887, Chapter 3, The Lauriston Gardens Mystery. He says this about the killer.
There has been murder done, and the murderer is a man. He is more than 6 feet tall, in the prime of life, and has small feet for a man of his height. He wore coarse, square-toed boots and smoked a Trichinopoly cigar. His face is florid, and the fingernails of his right hand are remarkably long. He came here with his victim in a two-wheeled cab, which was drawn by a horse with 3 old shoes and 1 new one on its off foreleg. These are just a few indications, but they may assist you.
So not just people footwear. You see, he isn't glancing at them, he's reading them. Like a scholar reads text, like a priest reads scripture, cracked leather and worn rubber, a geological survey, a biographical document, a temporal map, a confession. Observation tells me you have a little reddish mould adhering to your instep. Just opposite the Wigmore Street office, they have taken out the pavement and thrown up some earth. Sign of 4, 1890. This, as it turns out, isn't just fiction. Here's the thing no one likes to admit. Shoes don't lie. We dress to impress. We smile to deceive. We talk to misdirect. But nobody chooses the way their souls wear down. Nobody picks the mud they tread in. The evidence on a pair of shoes is involuntary, unself-conscious, authentic in a way most of the crime scene never is. Shoes tell you where someone has walked. They tell you what they do for a living. The clerk who paces the city pavements leaves different marks than the farmer who navigates the furrows. The nurse's feet keep time in the endless hospital corridors. The labourer drags heavy weight across uneven ground. They reveal the body, the gait, the balance, the dirt caught between the treads, clay, soot, sand, industrial residue, botanical matter, can all point to a location with enough specificity to make your assumptions sweat. A worn heel on one side suggests a long argument with an uneven stride. Years of habit, not hours of bad luck. Holmes could, as Watson testified, tell the different soils from each other. That skill doesn't stay in his mind, it seeps into his method. Shoes are a gateway drug to forensic deduction, like the first dose that introduces you to stronger chemicals. The shoe introduces the deductive mind to the science of inference. Unlike fingerprints, which want chemicals to wake them up, or bloodstains, which demand lab work waiting behind glass, shoes are visible, tangible, three-dimensional. The beginner can start immediately. One walks on rough terrain, the sole wears in a particular pattern. But more than patterns, shoes tell stories. A worn heel suggests an uneven gait. A specific kind of mud whispers a specific location. A small puncture hints at a sharp encounter. Then the city does what it always does. It stacks individual facts until they form a coherent narrative about a human life. Enough of one to make you uncomfortable if you're the sentimental type. Once you've seen the biography embedded in a soul, you can't unsee it. The shoe becomes the philosophy. But most people get stuck. I see it in myself, when the brain hits footwear and stamps the case closed. A shoe appears, the mind clicks. Functional fixedness, the psychologists call it. A shortcut that turns the investigation into a checkbox. Holmes trained himself to distrust the click. When most saw a shoe, he saw a geological record, a physical profile, a temporal map. He didn't ask, "What is this?" He asked, "What does this tell me?" "I make a point to never have any prejudices," Holmes says in the Reigate puzzle, "and of following docilely where the facts may lead me." Docilely. That's the part most people miss. Following the facts rather than imposing a narrative. Letting the evidence drag you across the floor, even when it doesn't bother to flatter your ego. It would be easy to throw all this back into the literary alley and call it romance. But the evidence just keeps showing up anyway. Forensic gait analysis. The identification of an individual's walking pattern wasn't formally used in criminal investigation until 2000, when consulting podiatrist Hayden Kelly identified jewellery thief John Saunders from CCTV footage at the Old Bailey, even though Saunders wore 2 pairs of trousers, a mask and gloves. Holmes was about 100 years ahead of the game. Footprints too. 29 of the 60 canonical Holmes stories include footprint evidence, spanning clay soil, snow, carpet, dust, mud, blood, ash, and even curtains. The systematic analysis of footwear as forensic evidence, what we call forensic podiatry, would take generations to be named and disciplined. Trace evidence had its own breadcrumb trail. In 1893, Austrian scientist Hans Gross suggested that perhaps the dirt on someone's shoes could tell more about where a person had last been than the toilsome inquiries. He later wrote the first handbook on criminal investigation. Dr. Ray Murray of Rutgers University later credited Holmes as the originator of forensic geology, publishing the first textbook on the subject in 1975. Inspector Lestrade used fingerprint analysis in The Adventure of the Norwood Builder in 1903, 2 years before Scotland Yard officially adopted it. Holmes authored monograms on typewritten documents and tobacco ash analysis. He discovered a test to detect hemoglobin, blood, 13 years before it was scientifically validated. And then there's Lecar's exchange principle, the part where the fictional detective and the real forensic scientist end up at the same truth without knowing each other's footprints. Lecar acknowledged the debt to Conan Doyle's creation, one through imagination, one through experimentation. Same destination, different routes. In a city like this, that kind of coincidence feels less like luck and more like inevitability. You can't understand Holmes without looking at his creator. Arthur was a qualified physician, trained at the University of Edinburgh. Medical education wasn't decoration, it was rigorous. It taught the scientific method, observation, empirical reasoning. And then there was his mentor, Dr. Joseph Bell. Bell could examine a patient in a hallway and deduce occupation, recent activities, household circumstances, before a word was even spoken. Doyle asked how. Bell said the secret was observation and knowledge. Bell became the template. Holmes became the disguise. The Victorian era was paradoxical. Investigative naivety wrapped in confidence. Police relied heavily on witness testimony and suspect interrogation. Physical evidence was secondary. Crime scenes got compromised, sometimes by the detectives themselves. Investigators famously erased a chalk message near one of Jack the Ripper's victims, destroying evidence while pretending they were protecting the story. Holmes insisted on protecting the crime scene from contamination. He insisted on scientific rigour. He refused to be swayed by testimony alone. That was revolutionary in 1887. It would take decades for the city to catch up to a fictional man. There's a scene in one of the latest stories where Holmes looks at Watson with something approaching pity. "You look at these things," he says, with the evidence before him, "but you do not observe." Looking is passive. Observation is active. It requires attention, training, and the willingness to distrust your own assumptions, especially the ones you're married to. We live in an age of overwhelming information, data and images and services everywhere, demanding nothing of you and offering everything to those who know how to ask. Holmes's method, looking before looking away, has never felt more relevant than it does now. The shoe at the crime scene isn't merely footwear, it's a philosophy, a discipline, a testament to the power of seeing what others overlook. And the man who taught us to read it? An invented detective created by a doctor with a gift for observation, quietly reshaped the world more thoroughly than most real-life heroes. Now, when I change my shoes, I find myself thinking about what they know about me and what they might testify to.